Good morning, everyone. Welcome. I love seeing faces. If you're able to put on your camera, you know we love to see your faces. It's great to see you. Okay, I'm gonna get started. So welcome to the third of our speakers in the Real World Starts Now speaker series. I'm going to give just a couple of announcements about what today's going to look like, and then we'll hand it over to our speaker. So you're going to be able to hear about Maine's forests from our speaker today. At the end of the talk today, like I did last week, I'll put a form in the chat. It's a quick form, and it's how we're going to take attendance to know that you're here and gather some of your reflections from the talk today. After the talk, you're going to move into your clusters to get working on your proposals for your Flex Friday projects. And by now, you should have received a communication from your cluster leader so you know what Zoom room to go to. If you have not done so, you can reach out to the cluster leader, but you can also find Flex Friday Zoom room links on the Zoom room document that we've been using for all of our classes. So that's how today is going to look for you. Keep in mind that your attendance is going to be taken for the morning and the afternoon in Power School today. So you do need to show up and be where you're supposed to be all day, throughout the day. I am really, really excited to introduce you to Patty Cormier, who is the director of Maine's Forest Division, Maine Forest Service. We are honored to have you here, Patty. We are so grateful for the resources of our forests and for the work that you're doing. So without further ado, Patty.
Hey everybody, it's good to see everybody, and hope everybody's staying safe and healthy. This is probably the largest group I've done a Zoom with, so bear with me. I'm going to go through some information about the Maine Forest, and I'm very excited if you're interested about the Maine Forest, because we need people in the Maine Forest Service, so think about it as a career.
Patty, so, I'm going to interrupt for 1 second. I should have said, students, if you're interested in doing a project related to forestry and you haven't honed in on your project topic, James Carey's cluster, he is connected to a lot of resources related to forestry in Maine. So please, if what Patty's saying is particularly interesting to you, consider talking to James Carey and getting over there into that cluster. Then that's all I'll say. Thanks.
Great, thanks. So I would be so honored if you guys did a project about the Maine Forest, because we always need new information. So just a little bit about myself. I grew up in Kingfield in the Western Mountains, did a lot of skiing at Sugarloaf. That was the fun part of school. In fact, it was required for one of the fourth grade, I think it was. We had to ski at Sugarloaf. So that was pretty tough. But grew up in Kingfield on, my folks had a ski lodge, and we had a couple 100 acres. My father would, in the summer, would wake me up at 4 in the morning to go fishing, and in the fall he'd wake me up at 4 in the morning to do firewood. So I didn't really like that then, but I appreciate it now. So anyway, I'm going to go through a bunch of slides about what the Maine Forest Service is, and also some information about the Maine Forest. And I hope in some way some of this information grabs you and interests you. So I have a PowerPoint. Okay, so the Bureau of Forestry. So there's 3 divisions: forest health and monitoring, forest protection, and forest policy and management. And a big reason I like you guys to see this slide is that look at all the career paths, look at all the titles on this slide of the different ways you can have a career, not only in the Forest Service, but in the natural resources area. So we have entomologists, the pathologists, we have inventory crews that go around every year and measure about 600 plots. They're secret plots. Nobody knows where they are except them. And this, from these plots, is all the information you hear about the forests, about how many trees and how healthy they are, stuff like that. And the entomologists and pathologists are very busy right now. Brown-tailed moth, spruce budworm, emerald ash borer, all these invasive insects that you might have heard about. And then we have forest protection, and these are the forest rangers. So they are the law enforcement arm of the Forest Service. So you might see them. They've got lights on their trucks, and they're the firefighting arm of the Forest Service. So we have 7 aircraft, which includes 4 big Hueys, big helicopters, and we have 2 smaller helicopters, and then we have a couple of fixed wings. So these folks, not only are they firefighters, they are doing natural resource enforcement, and also the aircraft with they've been doing a lot of rescues this year. You hear up at Baxter Park all the rescues that have happened this summer. Many of them have been done by our aircraft, and the Hueys are used for the firefighting, and the smaller helicopters are used for rescues. So as you can tell, when you have aircraft, you need pilots, mechanics, all that goes along with the aircraft. So the big role, again, is wildfire prevention and suppression, enforcement, and they respond to disasters and emergencies. And then there's the Forest Policy and Management Division, and that's district foresters who meet with landowners on a daily basis to help them with their land. How do they manage it? What do they do with it? What's the best way to cut it if they want to do that? We also have an urban and community forester that works with municipalities such as Portland or any of the cities. We have a water quality specialist and computer GIS specialist, and planners that oversee forestry programs and also that advise the legislature. So all this information the folks in the Forest Service measure and get is used to advise the legislature, which leads to laws sometime. So I just wanted you to see this slide just so you can see the scale of careers just in the Forest Service. We currently have how many? 8 vacancies with the forest rangers, and you need just 2 years of an environmental science kind of degree to be a ranger. To be a forester, it's a 4-year degree is required. And just it varies, same with entomology, pathologists, they need 4-year degrees, but we have seasonal crews and we have technicians. So I would love for you guys to think about the natural sciences area for your careers. So this just shows kind of a dramatic picture of wildland fire. We have had 1,100 fires this year, and that's the highest in 20 years. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the implications of that, such as climate change. Everybody's hearing about that. Everybody's studying that. If you want to do a project, that's a great project to look into. I mean, there's a lot of data out there about climate change, but we could always use more. So this is just an image of some of the folks out firefighting. This is not in Maine, I gotta admit. This is out west, and that's another part of, if you're with the Forest Service, we do send folks out west for firefighting if you want. We've sent out 60 people this summer, and we still have 2 engines in California. So our engines stay out there, and the crews keep switching out. They do 2-week mobilizations, they're called. So if you're at all, you know, you got to kind of be a little bit of an adrenaline junkie to do it. It's very exciting. It's 16-hour days. It's good pay. You guys, guys and gals, it's an amazing way to earn some good money too. If you like to do this, because you're out there and you can't. There's nowhere to spend it, right? So it's 16 hours a day, and you're getting overtime and hazard pay. So it's a great way to see the country, and to, if you're, if you're on the path of firefighting at all. So this slide, I just wanted to show you that a couple of the big things that the Forest Service does to try to protect the forest is to regulate harvesting. So on the top left, that slide is a fairly large clear cut, and clear cuts are legal, but they're limited in size. But we do regulate that, clear cuts are a tool for foresters, because there are situations, different kind of tree species, management schemes where you need a clear cut to bring in new trees. But we regulate when it's done incorrectly. So we watch over that. And then you see the bottom picture. That is where, believe it or not, there's a stream there. So we work very hard to prevent this kind of disruption to streams, because they're part of the whole watershed system of the forest. And if they're abused like this, it really affects the environment. So we work very hard on that. And this, just to show you, the foresters and the rangers and the entomology folks do a lot of, we used to do a lot of in-person classes. We still do limited ones outside, but we did classes on, top right is GPS, use of GPS, and bottom right is chainsaw classes. In the middle is a high school class measuring trees, and on the top left is a class with a bunch of loggers, and bottom left is we were trying to dig for some small trees in about 4 feet of snow. I don't know why we were doing that, but that's what they're doing. So then another big role for the Forest Service, as I mentioned before, is insects and disease. With there's going to be kind of a common theme, I say, with climate change. So with climate change comes the invasive insects and diseases and plants. And two of the insects, bottom right, Asian longhorn beetle, and on the left is an emerald ash borer. The Asian longhorn beetle is not in Maine that we know of. The emerald ash borer has just started coming into southern Maine and the northern tip of Maine. So this, we're very worried about that. It affects ash trees, and it's in 35 states already, and it's depleted, basically taking ash trees out of the picture in the forest. So the economic impact potential is very large, as we're the most forested state. It's a big part of our economy, so we're very worried about controlling this insect. The Asian longhorn beetle affects maple trees, and so of course we like maple syrup, so the maple syrup industry is very concerned with that insect. It isn't in Maine yet, but these insects travel on firewood, so that's why we've made it illegal to bring firewood into the state of Maine, so that folks don't carry these insects in. And then just wanted to show you kind of the cool tools that we have in the Forest Service. The top right, that just shows that we get stuck a lot. When you work for the Forest Service, you get a pickup. You have to be an independent worker, really. You make your own schedule, which is kind of nice. You don't have a lot of adult supervision, but it's for you to get your work done. So if you're a good independent worker and can work on your own schedule and work with others that way. So yeah, top right, that was me. That was my truck. I was stuck. It happens, And then top left, of course, some of the monitoring of the forest is on ATVs, snowmobiles, and then the bottom picture shows one of our Bell helicopters. That's one that's used for rescues. And which is pretty cool to see. It's amazing. We have a crew of rangers that we call them a dope on a rope. So they're hanging 100 feet down from that helicopter. Can you imagine being flown around? So you better trust that pilot, right? So just to tell you a story, there was a rescue on the knife's edge at Baxter. So this poor lady broke her leg right at the knife's edge. I mean, couldn't be in a worse spot. So our helicopter with the ranger hanging 100 feet down has to place that ranger beside the woman hurt, and then they hook her up and lift both the ranger. They essentially, what happens is they fly them to a place where they can get to an ambulance or more rescue personnel. But just imagine that you could be one of those dopes on a rope, right? Hanging 100 feet from a perfectly good helicopter. I say no thank you, but they do a great job. It's pretty fun. And this just shows you out in the woods, you sometimes see some crazy things. So see that big bear print? So that's a big bear. And then I think I have a bear picture in here somewhere. So that was just out in the woods. You see lots of critters, and really it's satisfying to know you're working to help the woods, which helps the wildlife in the forest. There we go. So that's a very small bear, kind of watching what's going on. This was in an area of a fire, a forest fire. And you always know when the fire is pretty much out because the wildlife starts to come back in. Okay, so let's look at some facts about the forest. So this is kind of the big picture of the forest. So you are all fortunate to live in the most forested state in the country. That's huge. So we have a lot of reasons to protect these forests. So 17.6 million acres of forest land, 89% of the state. Like I said, the most in the country. Almost 16 million of those acres are privately owned. Now the total impact of the forest products industry is 8.5 billion. So obviously we want to protect the forest because it's part of the economy. So the forest industry employs directly 14,500 people. So that's loggers in the woods, it's foresters, the entomologists, all the career paths in the forest. So that's a big part of the Maine economy. So the next line shows that harvesting since 2015 has gone down a little bit. I think everybody's gotten more efficient. There's an estimated 2,000 loggers working in the Maine woods, and it's been a significant decline since the 80s, and that's because of mechanization. So bigger equipment that takes less people, essentially. And over half the loggers asked would not encourage their children to go into the field, which is too bad because it's a professional field being a logger. We need loggers. There's 800 licensed foresters in the state, and enrollment in forestry degrees have dropped 50%. So it's bounced back a little bit, but so I went to the University of Maine at Orono, have a 4-year degree in forest management. And when I went, there were 187 in the forestry class, 6 women in that class. I was one of 6. And now they get about 35 in the class. So that's pretty amazing. And you know, if you're at all thinking maybe forestry is in your future, they I know at Orono give out some pretty great scholarships. Some are full scholarships for you to go because they want folks to go into the forestry field. And it is a field that will always be here. There's always careers in forestry. Sometimes you listen to the news and it sounds kind of dismal for the forest products industry, but it's growing. We need people. So I had mentioned that we have 10 state district foresters, and we have 10 of them, and they cover on average each about 570,000 acres, as compared to Minnesota, who they have about 287 district foresters. And then Maine is home to over 50,000 species of wildlife and 66 species of trees. And then bottom line, this is what keeps me up at night, okay? So the threats to our forests are the invasive insects and plants, fragmentation. What that means is we're growing more homes than in areas. So when a forest is converted to a different use, that's fragmentation. And then climate change. So the governor has a climate council and has determined that Maine should be carbon neutral by 2045. So that's a big big target, and the forests are a huge part of that target. Have you guys covered carbon, climate change, Mary? Do you know?
Yes, that's a big
Okay.
part of the curriculum here. And also one of our first speaker was from the Citizens Climate Lobby, and we have a group of
Right.
kids working on that, which is good. So yeah, they are learning a lot about climate.
Good, because it weaves its way into the whole mosaic of the forests. So here's some more numbers. So this, if you're ever on Jeopardy, that show Jeopardy, or you just want some maybe useless trivia, this is great. So trees over an inch, there's 24 billion trees in Maine, over an inch in diameter. So the volume of that is 205 million cords. So these are big numbers. So the growth of the forest every year, so how much they grow, is 5.9 million cords. And then what's removed is 4.1 million cords. So you can see we're growing, it's good, we're growing more than we're taking out, which is great. So then ecosystem carbon stocks in Maine, it's estimated 1.5 billion tons, okay? So that means essentially the carbon that trees are holding and sequestering. This represents an increase of less than 1% since 2013, but at least we're not going down. So the average tree captures 0.06 tons of carbon. And there's many variables to this number, but I just wanted to give you kind of an idea. So Maine's footprint for carbon, okay, is so that's what is being produced for carbon that goes into the atmosphere, is around 16.5 million tons. The average house produces 7.5 tons annually. So in your house, with your heating, most of it's petroleum products, oil heat, your house is emitting and adding to the climate carbon picture 7.5 tons. And the average vehicle is 4.5 tons annually. So I ask you guys, how can you help with that? So the governor has proclaimed that we should be carbon neutral by 2045, and that's you guys. I mean, you guys are the future of this. You are driving this. You can control this. You can be a part of the solution, and I really hope you are. So think about that. How average house produces 7.5 tons, average vehicle 4.5 tons. So maybe drive less. I mean, you probably have discussed that, but what are the ways you can help with that carbon problem? So in carbon or climate change affects the forests in that we're now having really extreme events. Remember I said that forest fires, we've had the highest in 20 years. So there's implications there with the temperature. So it's been drier, right? that adds to it. We're having extreme events where, so dry is drier and wet is wetter. So when we have rain, it's 5, 6, 7 inches of rain at a time. And we call those 100-year events. So we're having 100-year events multiple times in a year. And that's, that's all adding to the issues. So then we're having big wind events, and that will blow down a bunch of trees, and that adds to the the fuel load in the forest. So it's all connected. And then the bottom line about invasive plants. So these temperatures warming are encouraging invasive plants and invasive insects. They're marching in. So I talked about, we have a crew that measures a total of 3,500 plots throughout the state. Well, they're seeing that this increase of 2.2% of, it's about every year, of invasive plants on these forest plots. So that's very troubling, because these invasive plants, they adapt to the environment, they take over the site and prevent native species in. Then that affects the wildlife, because it's a different food source. The invasive plants, their berries are kind of like a Reese's cup, peanut butter cup. They're kind of empty calories. They're delicious, but to the birds and the critters, but they're not nutritional as our native plants are. So it affects wildlife. It's also circular, very multi-dimensional too. Okay, and just wanted to talk, we've all been hearing about the fires out west, and you just look at, and this is 2018, nationally, 4.8 million acres burned. It's going to be way more this year. But in 2018, 2.9 billion is the cost of this. I mean, we're all taxpayers. You guys are going to be paying taxes. That's a lot of money, right? And this is again that climate change coming in. So in California alone, this is in 2018, 1.9 million acres burned. And again, you're talking lives lost. And when you talk carbon, the smoke from those fires adds to the carbon issue. And it's just, sometimes it's very daunting to think about these numbers, and how, think about how can we bring about change? How can we affect this for the better? And it's, you guys have all the reason to be interested, because it's your environment and your future kids and grandkids, and on and on. So insects of concern in Maine, I was just going to cover these a little bit again, or further. Emerald ash borer, brown-tailed moth. Probably some of you are very aware of brown-tailed moth, because it's in the hairs on the moth are very, people react to them. Rashes, if you have asthma, the hairs get in your lungs, very bad. Winter moth, hemlock woolly adelgid. So those are invasive insects. Spruce budworm is native, and it's a 30-year cycle, and we're entering that. We're going to see spruce budworm again, mostly in northern Maine. So just to show you emerald ash borer in and near Maine, so it's in southern Maine and in extreme northern Maine. The northern Maine insects just flew over the river from Canada and decided to become residents of Maine. So that's where those came from. The insects from New Hampshire probably came from firewood. We don't know how they came in. They're slow movers on their own, but in a vehicle, they enter the state at 60 miles an hour. So that's why we got to be careful about transporting firewood. So look at the little fellas on the left side. Aren't they cute little faces? So that's the Asian longhorn beetle. I'm sorry, emerald ash borer. So they have these D-shaped holes. So if you see those holes, give someone a call. And also, all the stuff I'm talking about is on our website. So if you want more information, and I offer you, like I do any high school student, if you're interested in a career in any of those that you saw listed, call up and you can ride with a forester, a ranger. We had a student that wants to be a pilot, so he was with our pilot for the day. So, you know, I encourage you. We're just it's good to get your name out and get your face out there for your career. But call us up, and we'd be happy to have you have a ride along with any of those folks. So, getting off on a tangent. So, emerald ash borer, D-shaped holes. And then the Asian longhorn beetle, they're fairly large. We have 57 species of native longhorn beetles. One of them is a white spotted Sawyer, which is often confused with this guy. The difference is, you look at the bottom right, the holes in the tree, you can stick a pencil in. So that's unique to them. Big holes, and they attack maple. They come in on firewood or nursery stock. Brown-tailed moth, see all those little hairs? Just imagine those in your lungs and on your skin, and that's what happens is they shed these hairs, which that moth could be gone for a couple of years. You could go walking in the woods and all of a sudden you have a bad rash. So those hairs stick around a long time. So this is a public health issue. We just mapped 156,000 acres of infestation of brown-tailed moth, up from 126,000 last year. So it's growing. And this is just a comparison of the different caterpillars. They're really pretty, but they're not good. We don't want to see these guys. As a forester, I really don't want to see these guys. Gypsy moth, that's been in the state quite a while. Its populations are growing. See the kind of reddish dots on the back? That's pretty unique. The forest tent caterpillar, the white spots down the back, the eastern tent caterpillar, the blue lines on each side, and then the brown-tailed moth is those two orange dots on the on its back. So they're pretty unique looking when you see the caterpillars. And that's all I had. So I'd, if anyone, I guess we're opening up to questions at this point.
Yep. Students, you can feel welcome to write questions in the chat, and Tyler's going to be sharing those questions with me. I have some questions while we wait for that, Patty. This is so interesting, and especially all of the opportunities that you shared about careers in the forest. That gave me a lot of hope to hear that part of your talk. Anyhow, I have a question about invasive species. Are there healthy ways to kill invasive species without destroying ecosystems?
That's a really good question. That's a conundrum. And there are ways. I mean, it's are you talking plants or insects?
Well, I mean, my first thought was insects, but plants too.
Yeah. So what you're saying is, you know, without the use of chemicals to do that. So it depends. Every one of these insects has a different time span of larvae and eggs, and when they lay eggs, and it's a matter of knowing those times of when eggs are laid or when the moths are out. And the best thing is about being vigilant and looking for them. And essentially, if you find moths, you can, or caterpillars that are of these invasive species, you can stick them in a jar of gasoline. When they get to be big infestations, that's where it's very hard to control them. And that's where, unfortunately, sometimes it's chemicals are needed to take care of that. that's, brown-tail moth, with it being such a public health issue, towns are using, and there's chemicals that are safer than others, and they're using chemicals, and if it's at the right time, it prevents the eggs from hatching, kind of thing. With plants, there's you can pull the plants out. It's not the easiest thing to do, but if it's an early infestation, you can do that, and it's about being vigilant. And this is a war, really. We've got a war going on with these invaders, essentially from Asia.
Wow. Okay, thanks. I'm going to look at the document and share some other questions. Who should we contact if we find invasive species in the wild?
That's a great question. So you can go on our website and mainforestservice.gov, and you'll see on the left side is a link for invasive insects or plants, and you'll find all the information of who to call. Okay. Or, there's a district forester for every county, so that covers every county. So that's another route, called the district forester, but it's all on our website, and that's a great question.
Okay, yeah, that is a good question. Okay, the first question is rhetorical. You don't have to answer it. It's why does the brown tail moth caterpillar look like an end game dragon boss? No need to answer that. Okay, but the other one in the same vein. I
like it.
The other one in the same vein is what do they look like in moth form?
That's I wish I had a slide for you. The gypsy moth is a small white moth. The forest, they're all kind of bland moths. There's nothing, they're all pretty much small and either shades of brown to white. But that, again, good question. It's on our website. I should have had a slide to show you that. Yeah. Same with seeing the egg masses too. That's important.
Oh yeah, yeah. You can send it to me if you want, and I'll get it out to people.
Yep. Okay. Let me write that down.
I see one here. Hold on one second. Which colleges are the most favorable for a career with the Forest Service?
So, another great questions, you guys. So University of Maine at Orono is kind of the well-known college for natural resources, but there's Unity College. They've gone a little bit remote, I think, remote learning. University of Maine at Fort Kent has forestry curriculum, and that's about it for the colleges in Maine. There's also Paul Smith's College in New York that's well known for forestry. University of New Hampshire is well known, University of Vermont. So they're in Montana, there's a bunch, and of course they're very a lot more geared to fire regimes and firefighting.
Mm-hmm. Okay, can you explain some of the classes that would be taken in a forestry program?
Sure. So as with any, if you're talking a 4-year degree, the first 2 years are your core classes, biology, physics, the usual stuff, and then the second 2 years is it's challenging because most of the classes have a lab with them. So really, one class is 2 classes, and at Orono, I don't know why, but it's 141 credits to graduate with a forestry degree, and most degrees are 121 credits. So it's essentially it's been a 5-year program, and I think a lot of folks do it in 4 years. I wasn't smart enough to do it in 4 years. It took me 5 years to do it. But it's forest measurements, silviculture, forest management. You get out measuring a lot of trees. You do a lot of projects of how to manage different forest types. And there's, of course, wildlife classes, wildfire classes. It's any of the topics that I talked about today is part of the curriculum. Entomology, pathology, all those natural sciences.
Mm.
So really, I hope whoever asked that, think about it and remember what I said about there's great scholarships out there, because especially Orono is really trying to get folks into the forestry curriculum.
Mm. Patty, it sounds like a great fit for some of our Baxter students, truly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here's a question. What have been some of the challenges working in a male-dominated profession as a woman?
You know, that it has been a bit of a challenge. So when I first started, fresh out of college, I was in Washington County with a paper company, Georgia Pacific, and was literally thrown into the the harvesting and go supervise this crew of guys have been on this equipment for years, and so it was a challenge. But you know what I say, if you know your stuff and you make sense, it doesn't matter what gender you are. People are going to listen. It may be that sometimes, sure, people might listen to the guy beside me first. It's just kind of subliminal sometimes, but if you know your stuff and you're doing a good job, it doesn't matter. It's about what you know and what you can do for folks.
Thank you. Have you ever been a dope on a rope?
No, because I say, as I said before, why would you jump out of this perfectly good helicopter, right? It's a nice helicopter. So no, I did get in, and I don't know why it's called this. It's called I think I got this right. This screamer suit, maybe because people scream. I don't know, but it's this this gizmo. It's like a chair that it wraps around you and it hooks to the rope. So they did fly me around a little bit on that. I didn't scream, but maybe people scream and that's why they call it the screamer suit. But no, I haven't, but it looks pretty cool, and I so respect the folks that do that, and they train every week for that, because it's, as you can imagine, it's a very serious thing. But you guys should think about it. You guys and gals should think about doing that.
Yeah. What is the impact of ATVs on Maine's forests?
So that's another great question. It's more the impact on private landowners. So ATVs are great. They're useful, but they can do a lot of damage. So the impact is if it's not on a, say, an ITS trail, a formal trail, club trail, you're affecting the root systems. If it's wet, you're creating, they can create sediment in streams. And it drives me nuts, some of the commercials for these things show them blasting through streams, which yes, is a lot of fun. But it's hurting that stream. It's hurting the microbiotic element of that stream. It's hurting the fish. So, and that affects the water cycle of the trees, but mostly the physical impact of ATVs on the forest, if you're not really on a trail, is that you're affecting the root systems, which can affect growth and put them in decline and put the trees more suspect to insects and pathogens.
Okay. Okay, there's this question. I don't know if this is going to be in your wheelhouse, but we'll do this question and then one more.
Okay.
What is the deal with people cutting down the Amazon rainforest, and wouldn't it be better to chop down the Darien Gap instead?
Chop down the what?
Darien Gap instead. I don't know if that's forest speak.
I don't know what that is.
Okay, yeah, thank you. One thing that I was thinking about was how having healthy forests in Maine is also an answer to bad foresting practices in other parts of the world.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah, so it's global. It's a small world, and yes, we are 89% forested. Imagine what our trees are sequestering for carbon in the atmosphere and helping, the forests in Maine are a temperature control for our state. And the cutting of the Amazon forest, that's affecting globally the temperatures that we're dealing with. And it's really hard. I struggle with that myself. I talk about how can we help the carbon issue and climate change when other parts of the world are really the ones that are the emitters and the ones causing these changes. But it's about, how they say, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? So you just can't say, oh, it's useless, we can't do anything. It's that we all have to do our part, even though there's these other practices going on in the world.
mm-hmm. Thanks. Okay, one last question. Do you think that tourism is good or bad for Maine's forests?
So tourism as a whole is really good for our state. We need it. It's part of our economy. And really, when we talk tourism, they're in the state parks, which is great. And I want tourists to see what we're doing in Maine and our forests and to appreciate it so that they understand how special the forests are. So, and to bring that back home and possibly contribute to the solutions of any issues we face. So yes, tourists are good.
Okay, good. Thank you.